Finally, after making the new gear doors and installing the Electron electric retracts, I have everything working. Gear doors open, and retracts come out, and that looks pretty good. And gear going down. Gear is locked and gear doors going down. The process of outfitting the T-38 with new gear doors. So basically, obviously, the screws that hold on the hinges in place. So there's 4. I took those out. 1, 2, 3, 4. And what's next is I'm just gonna gently pry out hinges. There's 1 here, 2, and 3. So what I'm gonna do is just gently, let's see if I can, try and pry those out. They're epoxied in, but the epoxy for a lot of this stuff is not very tightly secured. So I'm just gonna jimmy a screwdriver nice and slow, release the gear door out, and then take this outline and try to make a template for it. So I was able to get the screwdriver, and I'm just gonna gently just pry that. And see, she comes right off. So I did the other hinge, and now I still have my 2 hinges. This one's kind of broken, but let's see. Let's zoom out here. So I still have both my hinges. This one is mostly intact. This one, it's kind of chewed up, but right, boom. So here's a template that I made from this. I basically put this down on a piece of paper, traced the outline of it, and then scanned it into a printer, and then used a photo editor to actually create that template in Illustrator. And then my wife was generous and kind enough to laser cut it for me. So it's not perfect, but then I can match this up. It's pretty close, actually. I can match this up and trim out the edges that don't match. So for the next step, I took out the gear. And the reason for that is I want to try and see how well this template fits. I know it's going to need some minor corrections. And then we'll move on from there. Okay, so now I'm happy with the fit of the template. I mean, looks pretty good. Comes in and out and fits pretty well. So the next thing I'm gonna do is actually put the Electron gear in place as it would be. And the reason for that is this cutout here is actually meant for the extra height that I showed earlier. So if you look at the Electrons, they have this portion that sticks out, but also the gear is much taller. So I need to accommodate for that, and that's why. I'm making new gear doors. So I'm going to install these here. How I line them up is, I know that in order for the wheels to work and clear the gear doors, these 2 holes must be mounted on these holes. So I'm just going to line those up. Let's see. And right now it won't allow me because the Electrons have this protrusion in the back. So I got to go in here and make some adjustments. So I gotta cut through that piece of wood that's further in the back, not this, but way in there. I'm pointing to it now. I gotta make that opening a little wider. So alright, so the Electron gear is now in place after I widened the holes in here a little bit. And this is important because when I put this mount on, I will see how much alignment I have I want to make sure this square is in the right spot because of this. So we're basically gonna build something on top of this to cover this because flat plate wouldn't work. Okay, so I'm liking that. All right, there you go. So even with the gear sitting flat, you can see that because of how high the electrons are, this plate doesn't actually sit flush on the wing. It actually sits on top of this strut. So what I'm going to need to do is build up some wood on the boundary. I'll show you what I mean on the border of this so that it sits and aligns with the edge that I'm trying to get this gyro to sit in. So we'll just add a little bit of balsa to make up that difference in height, and then check the fit again and then proceed. One key thing that's important to note is these hinges on the back. So these hinges will need to be obviously cut down because they can't, with the way the gear fits in, I can't use the entire hinge. I'll probably have to cut and use only half of it, but that's fine. And it's gonna sit in here in such a way that when I've added the wood to the edge, I can glue or screw these to this thin piece here so that the gyro will actuate. To do that framing, basically, I'm going to use this balsa. I got this from Michael's, and I'll just basically glue it in all around the edge, just like that. And this will make up that difference. It turns out to be just the perfect size that sits in that gap there, so it's pretty good. So I'll do that and come back once that's done. So the first pass is done, and what I'm using is, as I said, is this stuff from Michael's. It's really good stuff. So balsa 60/44, 1/8 inch, 8 inch by 36, and I just trimmed that and used CA to go around it. I haven't done this section because I'm going to use a different material here because that's where these hinges are going to bolt onto, so I need that material to be strong. But basically, if you see what's happening here is we are just building up to getting the extra height that we need. So we're not quite there. We'll need one more layer of these because you can see that still the center here is touching the gyro, but the edges are not. So I'm going to add one more of these all around and come back and show you what that looks like. So now you can see I have added the second layer of 1/8 inch by 1/8 inch balsa, and you can see what the gyro looks like. Went from just a plate to sort of a three-dimensional object, and now if we stick it on the gyro, boom, perfect. So looks like 1/4 inch or thereabout is the height that we're gonna get, and you can see that sits in pretty nicely. Let me see if I can zoom in. Like no play, very nice. So this is what I want. So we're gonna have to figure out a way to sort of gradually bring this down. I mean, I think it's just nicer. But now that I've got that sorted out, the next thing is to sort of put that piece of wood in the front where the hinges, which are these guys, they're gonna go in sort of like that, and that's how the gyro is gonna be hinged from the inside. So I'm gonna put this guy and then we'll come back. Okay. So I added a piece of basswood to the edge. So balsa, basswood, balsa, and I think this will work well because I will want the gear doors to screw into that, so it'll be sitting sort of like that, and that bottom ring of holes will get screwed into the basswood to hold the gear door. So alright, so far it's looking good. It fits in pretty nicely. So the next thing that I'll do is add some thin balsa sheet to the top, and then some balsa to the side, here, and then I'll use that to sort of match or meet this curve, this top surface to the wing surface. Alright, so what I've done is I've gone ahead and covered this hole with 2 sheets of balsa, and it's really thin balsa. So let's see. That stuff is, let's see. Wow, it's about 1.4, 1.5 millimeters thick. And I like this stuff because you can layer it on and it sands very easily. So I've covered that hole with 2 pieces, and the reason for 2 pieces is because on gear door, this surface kind of sticks out a little bit even after we've added the 2, so that when this sits down, if I were to cover this hole, you can see it's just, let's see, it's just come up. You can see on the edges here, it's just barely come up from this inner lining. So what I need to do is kind of force it down to create the markings of the gear door, and you can see that sort of here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of sand that out, sand this first block out, and then this second is going to capture that, and then we'll sand all of this stuff, make it nice and even, and then we'll fiberglass it. It shouldn't be very visible. So that's the idea anyway, so I will do that and get back once it's all done. Piece taken out looks like. Just use my Dremel to gently take out some material, and now we're back in business. So now this sits perfectly tight. So next step will be to add material on the side that will bridge the height difference, and then we'll sand this all down and then glass it. So I'll get that done. So next step, I have used this piece of balsa, again from Michaels. And what I went ahead and did is just took this piece and traced it out and cut, you know, thickness of, I don't know, 19 millimeters. Doesn't really matter that much, but basically just enough so that I can put the gear door and then put this right next to it. And the idea here is that I can glue this piece to that piece, and now I have much less height to worry about. So the height difference now becomes this here, and I can eventually sand this door down nicely to this surface. And so I'm going to glue this piece to that, this piece to that, and then we'll add some more really thin balsa in here, and then we'll sand that even, and that will be the makings of our gear door. And once that's done, we can kind of sand it as nicely as possible, get it smooth, and then glass it. The gear door kind of looks like now. You can see the flange and then the actual gear door. And so I'm just gonna put some CA around this to make sure that's nicely attached. Trim this off and then come back after that. Okay, so I cut some more balsa in the shape of this curve, and what I'm gonna do is just sort of glue that in place, and then we can use that to sand down that nice smooth curve. I'll do the same for this side as well. So I've added another, this is about 10 millimeters wide piece on the opposite side, and now you can see we have sort of the profile. It's gonna come up like that and then go back down. And so now what's left to do is to sand it really nice and smooth, and this balsa sands really well, and then glass it. Right, so I just used my 3M sanding block, and this is about 120 grit sandpaper. And I just smooth out the edges because all I want is just a nice profile, and you can see what that's starting to look like now. Just a nice smooth surface that I can then put some fiberglass over. And this is all gonna be waste, this stuff that's hanging on the side. The gear door is really gonna go from the edge of this balsa all the way to the edge of this. So but I will put the fiberglass so such that it overhangs a little bit. That way I have some waste, which is fine. So this to me looks ready. I have sanded it, so I'm just going to clean it with IPA, let it dry, and then we'll go ahead and put the first layer of fiberglass on it. The first step is get my fiberglass cloth, and I'm just going to trace a sizable piece of cloth with extra overhang. So the gear door is only up to right around here, but you see I have extra around, and I'll just help with the placement. And yeah, so I'll put this on, and we'll mix some epoxy and put it on the gear door. This patch is cut, and I'm just gonna get ready to epoxy it now. So we'll be doing 2 layers of cloth. So we'll do the first one and let it dry maybe about 8 to 10 hours, and then put the second one, let it dry another 8 to 10 hours, and then we'll come back once that's been done. Alright, so for this I'm gonna be using general purpose epoxy and micro balloons. I just like to add this stuff to the epoxy mixture. It makes it easy to sand, and they tell you what the ratio is, about 3 to 1 epoxy to micro balloons. So here's our mix. And you can see that micro balloons gives it that white color or consistency. So this stuff has about a 10 to 15 minute life, pot life. So I'm gonna work quick and put it on there, but just making sure that it's really thoroughly mixed together. Next step is I'm gonna take my brush, and I'm just gonna start working through it. Let's see. Okay. Okay. So that's good enough. I'm gonna take my light here and shine and see if I can see any dry spots. Doesn't look like I have dry spots, so I'm gonna take my shop towels and try to sort of blot out any excess resin or epoxy, because we don't want excess on there. It just adds weight. We just want the stuff that'll cause it to stick to the gear door. That's it. So all right, so you can see we blotched out quite a bit. I'm gonna add some tape just so that the piece doesn't move, and we're gonna put it outside. Whoops. This is just insurance to make sure that the fiberglass stretches out correctly, but more importantly, it just doesn't move while we let it cure or something. So, and you can see I'm putting it on the waste portion, so it doesn't really interact with the material area. It's just the waste parts, just to make sure this doesn't move. Nice. So we're gonna let this cure for about 6 to 8 hours and come check on it and see where. So it's been about 6 hours since I laid the first layer of fiberglass. I'm pretty impressed. There are some spots that I seem to have missed. Let's see, like you can see that right here, a few spots there, but otherwise it turned out pretty good. So I'm gonna go put on the second coat, and then second layer of fiberglass over this, and let that sit another 8 to 10 hours, probably longer, because it's evening time, so it's not going to be as warm, so it's going to take longer to cure. So I'm going to say overnight, probably tomorrow morning, and I'll look at it. And then at that point, I will cut it to shape. Basically, this is all this, a lot of this brown stuff is going to be waste, and a little bit of the light stuff is going to be waste too. So I'll cut it tomorrow, sand it down, and prep it for priming and painting. So, but otherwise I'm pretty happy with how this came out. So I'm gonna do the second coat now. Basically same process. Working on the wings to put the landing gear in, I noticed two things, and this is kind of annoying. So look at this first wing, look at the size of the plywood that's in the landing gear bay compared to that. So this is at least half the size of that, right? So that's wing one, because I was like, that's weird. I mean, forget about this piece. I added that piece to bolster that. I've added an extra piece of plywood, just epoxied it to the top. So now this is much thicker, and as I had said earlier, I also added a piece on the bottom here. So I feel like that is gonna be nice and strong. I just feel better about that instead of having that really thin plywood. So luckily I only have to do this on one wing. The other wing had nice thick plywood on both sides. So what's left is just fitting the gear and double checking, and basically I'm just gonna make up the height, because the Electron gear, as I said, are not designed for this plane, so you gotta lift them in different parts. So that's what the washers are for. Right, so the landing gear installation is done, and let's zoom in here. You can see all I had to do after adding this piece of plywood is one washer here and a couple in the back. I might consider doing the same here and just extending this plywood all the way to the end, so that I only have one piece of aluminum washer, of steel washer there. But it looks good so far. I'm happy with it. This feels nice and strong. The height has been made up, and the gear doesn't actually push on the skin. So that's something to be cautious about, is that when you install these retracts, you want to make sure that the bottom doesn't actually just push up and deform the wing. So when I look on the opposite side of the wing, you want that surface to still be smooth. You don't want any deformations there, and that's the case. So I'm pretty happy with that, and I hooked up the Electrons, and you can see, let's see, they work really well. The gear doors close nice and clean. I like that. I mean, it protrudes a little bit, but it's fairly clean. Once this is in flight, it's gonna look, I think, fairly nice. I use vinyl instead of paint, just because I'm gonna try and find a color match auto paint for this to paint the gear doors, but I was impatient. I just wanted to see how they would look with the white, and it looks pretty good. So that's the installation of the Electron landing gear. Had to change some stuff around, new gear doors, and change how that mounts onto here. But the beauty is, if I ever wanted to, I could always go back to using the original Skymaster air gear. So that's, for now, I'm very happy with this. Very, very happy with how this turned out. You will notice that I'm using the Skymaster wheels. and air brakes still, so I wasn't able to actually fit the Electrons. So these guys, I wanted to use these are 80mm Electron wheels with a 6mm hub, but just they didn't quite fit right, and I think it's because of how the wheel sits on the strut on the Skymaster. So I don't know, I'll figure something out, and then we'll let you guys know if I get this to work. But for now, I'm just gonna have to add air brakes, and that's not a big deal. It's just one tank of air for the brakes, but everything else is electric, so I'm pretty happy with that. So that sort of concludes the gear and gear door conversion from pneumatic to electric for now. So thanks for watching.